Welcome back to Self Invested, where we talk about how you can do better with money. In this video, I'm going to be comparing new build properties to older homes. There are quite a few videos out there that compare new builds and old builds, and they talk about some of the different characteristics and compare them side by side. What I'm going to try and do in this video is focus on the costs and give you some real facts and figures about the cost of buying, but also the cost of owning and just the ongoing monthly cost, comparing new builds to older builds. If you had asked me before I did the research for this video, I would have always said you're better off going for an older build. They're cheaper and you get more home for your money. But from doing my research, I think there are actually some good reasons why you may be better off going for a new build property, or maybe not better off, but there are some good reasons to go for a new build property. And I'm going to cover those in this video. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to give some tips for things to look out for if you're going for a new build property, but also if you're going for an old build property. So whether you're looking for either, make sure you stick around to the end just to hear what tips I have. So depending on where you look on the internet, you'll see different facts and figures for the difference in costs between a new build and an older build. But I actually found an interesting article on the Evening Standard's Homes and Property website where they compared the cost of one bed flats in London in 2017. They found that new build one bed flats were 25% more expensive than pre-owned privately built one bed flats. I just want to say that the percentages that I use are slightly different to the percentages used in the article, and I'm not sure why. I've worked out my percentages based on the figures that they give. So I'm using the figures that I'm using the percentages that I've worked out rather than their percentages, because I don't know how they've worked out exactly. So if you see there's a difference, that's the reason why. According to this article as well, you can actually get more value if you go for an ex-council flat. So if you went for an ex-council flat, this would actually end up being 27% cheaper than a pre-owned privately built flat and 42% cheaper than a new build one bed flat. So the best value you can get with a one bed flat or with a property is by going for an ex-council home or an ex-council flat. The only thing to bear in mind, however, is that with ex-council properties, they tend to be in estates, and these estates or these developments can be sometimes a bit tired. The communal areas can be a bit tired or look a bit rough. So it's important, if you go for an ex-council flat, that you make sure that you buy something that you're going to be able to sell. You don't want to buy something that's good value on the face of it, like it's a good price for what it is, but is in an area or in an apartment or in a block that looks quite rough, because when it comes to trying selling that property, you're going to have difficulty selling it. Also, older builds, especially those that were built before 1970, tend to be bigger than new builds. So if you buy an older build, you're going to get more home for your money. And if you were to compare the cost per square meter, you're going to find that a new build is a lot more expensive, a lot more than 25% more expensive than an older build, just because new builds are smaller and older builds are bigger. So that's another thing to bear in mind. So the next thing we're going to look at in this video is the cost of owning and running a new build property compared to an existing property. Now this is where new build properties start to perform better in terms of costs in comparison to older build properties. So the first thing we're going to look at is energy costs. Now, according to energy performance data that was published in 2017, 80% of new build properties achieved either an A or B rating when it comes to energy efficiency. Now this compares to just 2.2% of older properties. When you look at this in terms of cost, this means that the average new build property spends around £443.30 a year on gas and electric, so on their utilities, compared to the average older property, which spends around £1,072 per year, which is more than double the amount of a new build property. So this is a good reason to actually go for a new build property, is the energy efficiency. Because they're made to a higher standard in terms of energy efficiency, they have double glazing, they have insulated walls. The ongoing cost of heating and running your home is actually cheaper. This is something to bear in mind if you're looking for an existing property. Try and look for an existing property that already has a decent energy efficiency rating. If you want to sort of get an idea of how much the energy costs of that home you're buying is going to cost, try and find out exactly how much the current owner spends a month on utilities or has spent over the year. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for the bill or their energy usage from the last year. If the person that's selling that property wants to sell it and you're a willing buyer, I think that is useful information for you to have, so you can see how much it will cost in utilities over a year. The next benefit you get with a new build over an older build is that with a new build, everything is new. The windows are new, the roof is new, the heating's new, the electrics are new. And so for the first 10 to 15 years, it's unlikely you're going to have to do anything in terms of any major or substantial repairs or replacement work to your home. With an older build property, there may be parts of the building that are new, but it's likely that you're going to have some older parts to the building, and over the next 10 to 15 years, you're going to have to do some works. With a new build property, this is less of a risk. And you also get a new build warranty. So if there are any structural issues, such as with your roof, during the first 10 years of you owning that property, then you can get those issues fixed. And also, if you have any issues within the first 2 years of ownership, such as the heating's not working or other internal issues such as that, then you can also get those fixed free of charge. But with a pre-owned property, there's no such warranty. It's very unlikely you're going to have a similar type of warranty. If anything goes, if the roof goes in the first 10 years, then you're going to have to fork out the money to fix it. And if there's any issues with the windows, if the windows need replacing, that's also going to be your responsibility. If you're buying an existing property, try and find out what the age of the roof is, what the age of the window is, what the age of the heating system is, what the age of the wiring is. Because if they're 10 to 15 years old, then it's likely in the near future you're going to probably have to replace them, especially if they're 20 years old. There's a good chance in the near future that you're going to have to replace them. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy the place, but you should factor in the cost of replacing those parts of the building into the offer that you make. The next benefit you get with a new build, which is specifically to do with leasehold properties, is that if you're buying a new build property now, it's likely that you're not going to have to pay any ground rent. And if you're buying a new build property now, I would say don't go for any place that's charging ground rent, because it's about to be abolished. It's going to be abolished in the next 14 months. And there are already 5 house builders that have said that they're not going to be charging any ground rent at all. If you want to find out more about that, then check out the video that's popping out above my head talking about the leasehold reforms. Also, new build properties are actually coming with 999-year leases, which is very untypical. Currently, the longest lease you can normally get is 125 years, but 2 house builders have already said that they're going to grant 999-year leases for all of their future leasehold properties. Now, that's Barratt Homes and Bellway Homes. So that's a benefit that you get with new build properties that you probably won't get with an existing property. With an existing property, the longest the lease is going to be is probably 125 years, but it's probably going to be shorter because that's the lease length that the person who bought the property initially would have got, and you're buying it after that, so it's probably going to be shorter than that, and you're going to have ground rent to pay. And ground rent, it can range from 250 a year to 500 a year, or maybe even more. And that doesn't sound like much, but it does increase over time. And if you ever need to extend your lease, it does make your lease extension more expensive. So the fact that you can with a new build property, you're not going to have to pay any ground rent, and you can get a much longer lease. That is a major benefit. If you do go for a pre-existing leasehold place, try and find one where the lease has already been extended. So it's either been extended already by 90 years, or if it's extended in the future by 990 years, and there's no ground rent to pay, because that's going to be a major benefit. Now, one ongoing cost where new builds don't perform so well is service charge. Now, this tends to be because with new builds, they have a lot more expensive communal or shared features, such as either concierge services or gyms, or they just have more communal space. According to research by Direct Line for Business, they found that the average cost of service charge for a new build is £2,777. Now, this is around 96% more than the cost of service charge for your average older property, which is around £1,417, which is, yeah, almost half the cost of service charge for new builds. So if you're buying a new build property, try and avoid buying a new build property in a development where there are a lot of communal spaces, and where there are a lot of shared services like concierge services, or even lifts. If you don't need a lift, if you're not on a, a 16-story building, and it's just a few stories high, then if you can do without a lift, then maybe go without a lift, because it will be cheaper in terms of your monthly service charge. Now, my final thoughts on the ongoing costs with new builds and older builds are that although new builds can tend to be cheaper in terms of the ongoing running costs, with the exception of service charge, I still do think that older or pre-owned homes do provide more value, even after factoring the cost of energy and a possible lease extension and any maintenance. For example, I bought my flat, and the lease wasn't extended, and it was a pre-owned property, and I had to extend the lease, and my lease extension cost around 5% of the value of my property. But if I was to go for a new build property, it would likely cost around 25% more than what I paid. So that's 5% compared to 25% for a new build property, which is still a lot cheaper. And even if I had to replace the windows to improve the energy efficiency, or put insulation into the cavity wall, then I'm still likely to pay less than that extra 25% it would cost to buy a new build. But what you do get with a new build is the convenience of not having to worry about these things. If you buy a new build with a long lease, you don't have to worry about extending the lease. Also, if it's got good energy efficiency already, then you don't have to worry about improving the energy efficiency. And then also, if it's new, then it's likely you're not going to have to do many major repair or maintenance costs. So that's the thing, that's the benefit of getting a new build property. You have the convenience of not having to worry about a lot of these things. Now, if you're buying a new build property, I think the first important thing to do is make sure that your service charge is not going to be high. Make sure that there aren't too many shared features or communal areas that you're going to have to be paying for, because that's just going to make it a lot more expensive for you. The next tip is, if you're buying a new build property, look for one where you can get a long lease, so like 999 years or at least 250 years. Also, look for a new build property where you're not paying any ground rent, and look for one where you actually manage the services of your building, where residents have been given the right to manage the services of that building. There are actually two developers that have announced that they're handing over management to the residents, so you will have a lot more control of the service charge, and that's Bellway Homes and Barrett Homes. Now, the third tip is especially for people that are buying new build homes through the Help to Buy scheme, and that's not to pay over the odds. If you're buying a new build property through the Help to Buy scheme, there's research done by which to suggest that you're going to pay more than somebody not using the Help to Buy scheme. So try and do your homework and find out how much that property is worth so you don't pay over the odds. If you're buying an existing property, my first tip is look for an existing property with a decent energy rating. Now, it doesn't have to be A or B, but make sure it's not the worst energy rating, because that's going to cost you a lot in terms of running costs. If you do go for a place that doesn't have very good energy, it doesn't have a very good energy rating, make sure you factor that into your offer. Make sure you factor in the cost of replacing the windows, putting in insulation into the cavity wall, and just doing things to actually improve the energy performance of that building. My next tip is make sure you check the age of the different elements of the building you're buying. So if you're buying an existing property, make sure you ask what the age of the windows are, how old the roof is, how old the electrics are, how old the heating is. If these things are like 15 to 20 years old, if they're getting to that sort of age, then it's likely in the near future they're going to be replaced. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy the place. It just means it's something that you should factor into the offer that you make. Make sure you factor in the cost of replacing these things, because in the near future it's likely you will have to replace one or all of these things. Now, my last tip for somebody, and this is specifically for anyone that's buying a leasehold property, is look for a leasehold property where the lease has already been extended, so you don't have to worry about extending it, and the ground rent is zero, so you don't have to worry about the cost of ground rent increasing over time. That brings us to the end of the video. Let me know what you think. Did you learn anything new? Did you find it helpful? If you did, please let me know down in the comments. And if you did like the video, give the video a like. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Anyway, until next time, take care. Bye.